Cinderfall Legacy. Talia Corvin had spent her life running, though she never knew from what. But when the horn sounded and the world stilled, the chase ended. The trees leaned inward. The mist curled around her ankles. And then he emerged golden-eyed, broad-shouldered, his presence suffocating. "You should have run faster," he murmured, tilting his head. "Because now, the hunt has found you." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Dusk begin. The cottage nestled deep within the embrace of Whisperwind Forest, its stone walls cloaked in ivy that rustled like secrets in the evening breeze. Talia Corvin, a woman of 62 years, her silver hair a stark contrast to the deep green of the surrounding woods, stood on the porch, a chipped mug of chamomile tea warming her hands. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and pine needles, usually soothed her, but tonight, an unsettling tremor ran through it, like a discordant note in a familiar melody. Talia had lived in this secluded haven for over a decade, a self-imposed exile from a life she couldn't quite recall, yet couldn't entirely forget. Fragments of memory, sharp and disorienting, haunted her dreams: a city ablaze, a man's anguished cry, the chilling glint of steel. She had woken up one morning, years ago, in a hospital bed, her mind a blank slate, save for a name Talia Corvin and an overwhelming urge to flee. She'd followed that instinct, finding solace in the solitude of the forest, in the rhythm of nature, in the quiet company of her own fractured thoughts. Tonight, however, the quiet was broken. Not by a sound, not yet, but by a feeling. A prickling on her skin, a tightening in her chest. She looked out at the towering pines, their silhouettes stark against the darkening sky. The wind had picked up, whispering through the branches, carrying a sound that made her heart clench, a low, mournful howl, unlike any wolf she'd ever heard. It echoed the hollowness within her, a void she'd tried to fill with gardening, with books, with the simple routines of a solitary life. She wrapped her worn, knitted shawl tighter around her shoulders, the wool rough against her skin. Her hands, gnarled with age and etched with the stories of a life unremembered, trembled slightly. The mug slipped, a splash of tea staining the weathered wooden planks of the porch. She bent to wipe it, her movements slow, deliberate, a stark contrast to the frantic beating of her heart. "Just the wind, Talia," she murmured to herself, her voice raspy, a comforting counterpoint to the unsettling symphony of the forest. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were a lie. This wasn't just the wind. This was something different, something older. Inside the cottage, the fire in the hearth had died down to embers, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The room was filled with the comforting clutter of a life lived in isolation. Stacks of well-loved books, dried herbs hanging from the rafters, hand-stitched quilts draped over worn armchairs. A single, framed photograph sat on the mantelpiece, a faded image of a younger Talia, her smile bright, her eyes full of a life she couldn't remember. She often stared at that photograph, searching for a flicker of recognition, a key to unlock the mysteries of her past. But the woman in the picture remained a stranger, a ghost of a life lost. The howl came again, closer this time, sending a shiver down her spine. It was followed by another sound, a distant, rhythmic drumming, like the beating of a giant heart. Talia felt a pull, a strange, magnetic force drawing her towards the forest, towards the source of the unsettling sounds. She resisted, her rational mind warring with an instinctive, primal urge. She walked to the window, her breath fogging the glass. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast an ethereal glow on the trees. And then she saw it, a flicker of movement, a shadow deeper than the others, shifting between the trees. It was large, far larger than any wolf, and it moved with a sinuous grace that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm mirroring the distant drumming. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of her amnesia, a primal instinct screaming at her to run, to hide. But where could she run? This forest, this cottage was all she knew, And a part of her, a small, defiant part, was tired of running. Tired of the fear, tired of the unanswered questions. She took a deep breath, the crisp night air filling her lungs. The scent of pine was now mixed with something else, something wilder, musky, intoxicating. It tugged at her senses, awakening something dormant within her, something that resonated with the mournful howl and the rhythmic drumming. The drumming grew louder, closer. The shadow in the forest shifted again, and then, with a suddenness that made her gasp, it stepped into the clearing. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his silhouette outlined against the moonlit trees. He was dressed in what looked like ancient leather armor, his face obscured by the shadows, but she could see the glint of his eyes, a piercing, golden yellow that seemed to burn through the darkness. He stood there for a moment, his gaze fixed on the cottage, on her. Talia felt a strange sense of recognition, a flicker of something familiar in the depths of his gaze, a connection that defied logic and reason. It was as if she had known him, in another life, in another time. He tilted his head, a slow, deliberate movement, and then he spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground she stood on. "You should have run faster," he murmured, the words carrying on the wind, reaching her ears with an unsettling clarity. "Because now, the hunt has found you." The air stilled. The drumming ceased. The only sound was the frantic beating of Talia's heart, a wild, desperate rhythm against the backdrop of his words, words that echoed with a chilling finality, a promise of something inevitable, something terrifying, yet strangely alluring. The hunt. What hunt? And why had it found her? Chapter 2. Echoes in the Ancient Wood. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like the mist that was now beginning to curl around Talia's ankles, blurring the edges of the clearing. Her breath hitched in her throat. The golden eyes of the stranger held her captive, a predator locking onto its prey. Yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. She'd spent years running from shadows, from whispers of a past she couldn't grasp. Perhaps this was the end of the running. "Who are you?" Talia's voice was surprisingly steady, despite the tremor in her hands. She clutched the shawl tighter, a fragile shield against the encroaching cold, both physical and metaphorical. The man took a step forward, the moonlight catching the sharp angles of his face, revealing a jawline shadowed by stubble, a strong, straight nose, and lips that were set in a firm, unyielding line. He was undeniably handsome, in a rugged, untamed way, but it was a beauty laced with danger. He moved with a fluid grace that belied his size, an animalistic quality that sent another shiver down her spine. "You know who I am," he said, his voice a low growl that resonated deep within her chest. "Or at least a part of you does." His words struck a chord, a discordant note of familiarity that vibrated through the fog of her amnesia. She did know him, on some instinctive cellular level. It was a knowing that bypassed her conscious mind, a recognition that resided in the marrow of her bones, in the rhythm of her heart. "I don't remember," she whispered, the words a confession of her brokenness, her incompleteness. He stopped a few feet from the porch, his gaze unwavering. The mist swirled around him, making him seem almost ethereal, a creature of the forest, of the night. Memory is a fickle thing, Talia Corvin. It can be lost, buried, twisted. But the blood remembers. He reached out a hand, palm up, as if offering an invitation, or perhaps a challenge. The moonlight glinted off something metallic on his wrist, a thick, silver band engraved with intricate symbols she couldn't quite decipher. The sight of it triggered another flicker of recognition, a fleeting image of a similar band on her own wrist, a long-forgotten weight. Talia hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to barricade herself inside the cottage, to cling to the fragile safety of her solitude. But the pull towards him, towards the mystery he represented, was too strong to resist. It was a pull that promised answers, a pull that promised to fill the void within her. "The hunt," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is it? A flicker of something sadness? Regret? crossed his features, quickly masked by a stoic expression. It is a tradition, a duty, a curse. He paused, his golden eyes searching hers. It is something you were born into, Talia. Something you cannot escape. Born into? The words echoed the fragmented memories that haunted her dreams, the sense of being pursued, of being different. I don't understand, she said, frustration lacing her voice. I don't remember any of this. You will, he said, his voice softening, a hint of compassion breaking through his hardened exterior. In time. But for now he lowered his hand, the silver band disappearing into the shadows of his sleeve. For now, you need to trust me. Trust. The word felt foreign on her tongue, a concept she had long abandoned. How could she trust this stranger, this hunter, who had emerged from the shadows, claiming a connection she couldn't remember? Yet, looking into his eyes, she saw not malice, but a weariness, a burden carried for far too long. The mist thickened, obscuring the trees, the clearing, the world beyond. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for her decision. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the crackling of the embers in the cottage hearth, a distant, fading echo of warmth and safety. Talia took a shaky breath, the cold air stinging her lungs. She looked at the cottage, at the life she had built within its walls, a life of quiet solitude, a life of running. And then she looked back at the man, at the hunter, at the mystery he embodied. What do you want from me? She asked, the question a plea, a challenge, a surrender. He met her gaze, his golden eyes holding hers captive. I want to protect you, he said, the words simple, yet profound. From the hunt. From yourself. From the truth that awaits you. He offered the protection and exposed the danger. He called for trust, but promised more questions than he answered. The choice felt too large, too immediate. She wanted to fall back, into the familiar loneliness. But something, a spark perhaps of the woman she was meant to be, burned through. She was a stranger to herself, to him, but this felt like a beginning. And if I refuse? She asked, the whisper almost swallowed by the wind. His expression remained unwavering. Then the hunt continues. And it always finds its prey. He paused. The weight of some ancient grief, some hidden pain filled the space between them. But not always in the way that one expects. Chapter 3. The Hunter's Moon Rises. The implied threat hung heavy in the mist-laden air, a chilling counterpoint to his earlier offer of protection. Talia's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a primal drumbeat of fear. Yet, beneath the fear, a strange sense of inevitability settled over her. It was as if she had been running towards this moment, this confrontation, her entire life, even without knowing it. She looked at his eyes, those unsettling, golden eyes that seemed to see straight through her, to the core of her being. They held a depth of sadness, a weariness that resonated with her own fragmented soul. It was a weariness born of carrying burdens too heavy, of facing truths too painful. Why protect me? She asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a desperate need to understand. If I am part of this hunt, why not simply end it? He stepped closer, the mist swirling around his feet, making him appear almost like a phantom, a creature of the night. The scent of pine and something wilder, something undeniably him, intensified, filling her senses, stirring a strange, unsettling mix of fear and something else. Something akin to longing. Because you are not just part of it, Talia, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground she stood on. You are the key to it. The key to ending it. His words were cryptic, yet they resonated with a deep, hidden truth within her. She felt it in the marrow of her bones, in the echo of forgotten memories, in the strange, magnetic pull that drew her to him. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her arm, his touch hesitant, as if he were afraid to break some fragile spell. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. The warmth radiating from his hand was a palpable presence, a stark contrast to the chilling mist that surrounded them. The hunt is ancient, He continued, his voice a husky whisper, a cycle of violence and vengeance that has spanned generations. It is fueled by a curse, a blood debt that must be repaid. And you hold the power to break that cycle. A curse. Blood debt. The words echoed the fragmented nightmares that plagued her sleep, the flashes of violence, of betrayal, of a love lost. She felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest, a phantom ache that resonated with the echo of a long-forgotten heartbreak. "I don't understand," she stammered, her voice trembling. "How can I break a cycle I don't even remember being a part of?" He lowered his hand, his fingers brushing against hers for a fleeting moment, sending a jolt of electricity through her. The contact was brief, yet it left a lingering warmth, a tingling sensation that spread through her arm, her chest, her entire being. "By remembering," he said, his gaze unwavering. "By embracing the truth of who you are, of what you are." He gestured towards the forest, towards the deepening shadows beneath the trees. "The answers lie within, Talia. Within the forest, within your blood, within your memories." The moon, now fully risen, cast a silvery glow on the clearing, illuminating his face, revealing the lines of worry etched around his eyes, the hint of vulnerability beneath his stoic mask. It was a face that had seen too much, felt too much, a face that mirrored the hidden depths of her own fractured soul. Talia looked at the forest, at the dark, imposing trees that seemed to beckon her, to challenge her. It was a place of shadows, of secrets, of danger. Yet, it also held the promise of answers, of truth, of a connection to the past she had lost. She took a deep breath, the crisp night air filling her lungs, the scent of pine and his intoxicating musk grounding her, centering her. The fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was no longer the overwhelming force it had been moments ago. It was tempered by a growing sense of determination, of curiosity, of a desperate need to understand. "Take me," she said, her voice clear and steady, a declaration of intent, a surrender to the inevitable. "Take me into the forest. Show me the truth." He nodded, a flicker of something that might have been relief crossing his features. "As you wish," he said, his voice softening. "But be warned, Talia. The path ahead is not easy. The truth can be a dangerous thing." He turned and started walking towards the trees, his movements fluid and graceful, the embodiment of a predator at home in its domain. Talia hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the cottage, at the familiar comfort of her solitary life. It was a life she was leaving behind, perhaps forever. She took one last look at the photograph on the mantelpiece, at the smiling face of the woman she used to be, a woman she no longer knew. And then, with a deep breath, she stepped off the porch, into the mist, into the shadows, into the embrace of the ancient wood, following the hunter, following the path towards a truth that awaited her, a truth that promised both danger and liberation. The moon, a silent witness, hung high above, casting its silvery light on their journey, a hunter's moon illuminating the path towards a forgotten destiny. A single howl, long and lonely, cut through the night. This time, it felt less like a warning and more like a welcome. Chapter 4. Shadows of a Forgotten Past. The forest enveloped them in a shroud of shadows and silence, the moonlight filtering through the dense canopy in dappled patterns, creating an ethereal, almost otherworldly atmosphere. The air was cooler here, thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the ever-present, intoxicating aroma of pine and the man who walked beside her. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the clearing, his presence a silent, watchful guardian. Talia found herself studying him, trying to decipher the enigma he represented. He moved with the effortless grace of a wild animal, his senses alert, his body attuned to the subtle nuances of the forest. His leather armor, she noticed now, was intricately crafted, adorned with symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer in the moonlight, hinting at an ancient, forgotten magic. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice breaking the silence, a tentative step towards connection. He glanced at her, his golden eyes reflecting the dappled moonlight. "Caspian," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to blend with the rustling of the leaves.
Caspian.
The name resonated with something deep within her, a faint echo of a forgotten memory, a whisper of familiarity. It was a name that belonged to the shadows, to the ancient wood, to the wild, untamed heart of the forest. Caspian, she repeated, testing the sound of it on her tongue, feeling the weight of it in her heart. It felt right. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the soft crunch of their footsteps on the leaf-strewn path. Talia's senses were heightened, acutely aware of every rustle, every snap, every whisper of the wind. The forest, once a place of solace, now felt charged with a palpable energy, a sense of anticipation, of waiting. "You said I was the key," she said, breaking the silence again, her voice echoing her earlier question. "The key to ending the hunt."
How?
Caspian stopped, turning to face her, his expression shrouded in shadow. "The hunt is tied to your bloodline, Talia," he said, his voice grave. "To a curse that was placed upon your ancestors centuries ago." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her, a strange, comforting sensation amidst the growing unease. His fingers were calloused, strong, yet his grip was gentle, almost reverent. He turned her hand over, his thumb tracing the faint lines on her palm, the intricate network of veins that pulsed beneath her skin. "Your blood, it holds the power to break the curse, to heal the wound that has festered for generations." Talia looked at her hand, at the familiar lines, the subtle patterns that she had never truly noticed before. It was just a hand, an aging hand, etched with the stories of a life, partly unremembered. Yet, according to Caspian, it held the key to an ancient curse, to a cycle of violence that had spanned centuries. "But how?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What am I supposed to do?" Caspian released her hand, his touch lingering for a moment longer than necessary, leaving a warmth that spread through her arm, her chest. "The curse is tied to a specific place," he said, his gaze shifting towards a darker, more densely wooded area of the forest. "A place of power, a place of ancient magic. We must go there." He pointed towards a towering rock formation that loomed in the distance, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. It looked ancient, forbidding, a silent sentinel guarding secrets long forgotten. "What is that place?" Talia asked, a sense of foreboding settling over her. "It is called the Whisper Stone," Caspian said, his voice low and somber. "It is where the curse was first uttered, where the blood debt was first incurred. It is where your ancestors made their pact with the darkness." A pact with the darkness. The word sent a shiver down her spine, conjuring images of ancient rituals, of forbidden magic, of a sacrifice gone terribly wrong. She felt a sudden, sharp pain in her head, a fleeting image of a woman with silver hair, standing before a similar rock formation, her face contorted in anguish. I think I remember something," she stammered, clutching her head, trying to grasp the fleeting image before it faded away. "A woman," she was crying. Caspian's eyes widened, a flicker of hope illuminating his golden gaze. "What else do you remember?" he asked, his voice urgent, encouraging. But the image was gone, swallowed by the fog of her amnesia, leaving only a lingering ache and a sense of profound loss. "Nothing," she whispered, frustration and despair lacing her voice. "It's gone." Caspian sighed, the hope fading from his eyes, replaced by a familiar weariness. "It will come back," he said, his voice softer now, reassuring.
"In time."
"The Whisper Stone, it will help you remember." He started walking again, towards the towering rock formation, his pace quickening, as if he were drawn to it by some invisible force. Talia followed, her mind racing, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The Whisper Stone, the place of the curse, the place where her ancestors had made a pact with the darkness, the place where, perhaps, she would finally find the answers she had been searching for, the truth of who she was, of what she was meant to be. The weight of a forgotten past and a future yet unknown sat on her shoulders. But at least now, she wasn't walking it alone. The shadows held answers, and she finally felt, after so much lonely searching, strong enough to face them. Chapter 5. The Scent of Pine and Wolf. The air grew noticeably colder as they approached the Whisper Stone, a palpable chill that seeped into Talia's bones, despite the warmth of Caspian's presence beside her. The scent of pine, which had been a comforting constant throughout their journey, was now mingled with another, more primal aroma, a musky, animalistic scent that she instinctively associated with wolves, with the wild, untamed heart of the forest. It was a scent that both repelled and intrigued her, awakening a primal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. Caspian, she noticed, seemed more alert, more on edge, his senses heightened, his body tense. He moved with an even greater fluidity, his eyes constantly scanning the shadows, his hand resting on the hilt of a large, curved knife strapped to his thigh. The weapon, she realized, was not merely decorative. It was a tool of his trade, a weapon of the hunt. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, sensing his unease. He glanced at her, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight, their depths filled with a mixture of caution and something else. Something that looked like concern. "We are not alone," he said, his voice low and guarded. "There are others who follow the hunt." "Others?" The words sent a shiver down her spine. Were they hunters like Caspian? Or something else? Before she could ask, he stopped abruptly, his body rigid, his nostrils flaring. He sniffed the air, like a wolf scenting its prey, his gaze fixed on a dense thicket of trees to their left. "They're close," he said, his voice barely audible. "And they're not friendly." He drew his knife, the moonlight glinting off its polished blade. The weapon looked ancient, powerful, its edge honed to a razor sharpness. The sight of it, coupled with his words, sent a wave of fear through Talia, a primal terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "Who are they?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What do they want?" Caspian didn't answer immediately. He stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body, his gaze still fixed on the thicket. "They are shadows of the past," he said, his voice strained. "Creatures bound to the curse, twisted by its darkness. They hunt those who carry the blood of the Corvin line." The blood of the Corvin line.
Her blood.
Talia felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest, a phantom echo of a long-forgotten wound. She remembered the fragmented dreams, the sense of being pursued, of being hunted. It was all real. It was all happening again. "They want to kill me?" she asked, the words a choked whisper. Caspian turned his head, his golden eyes meeting hers, their depths filled with a fierce determination. "Not while I'm here," he said, his voice a low growl, a promise of protection, of defiance. His words, his presence, gave her a surge of courage, a flicker of hope amidst the overwhelming fear. She trusted him. Despite the strangeness of their situation, despite the danger that surrounded them, she felt a deep, instinctive trust in this man, this hunter, who had emerged from the shadows to protect her. He turned back to the thicket, his body tense, his knife held ready. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by the rustling of the leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, and the frantic beating of Talia's heart. And then, with a suddenness that made her gasp, the shadows in the thicket shifted, coalesced, taking on a form that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. It was a creature of nightmare, a grotesque parody of a wolf, its fur matted and black, its eyes glowing with a malevolent red light, its fangs bared in a snarl that revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was not alone. Behind it, two more shadows emerged, their forms equally monstrous, their eyes burning with the same unholy fire. They were creatures of the curse, twisted and corrupted by its darkness, their forms a testament to the power of the ancient magic that bound them. Caspian stood his ground, his body a shield between Talia and the creatures, his knife held high. He let out a low growl, a challenge, a warning, a sound that resonated with the wild, untamed spirit of the forest. "Stay behind me," he said to Talia, his voice calm, controlled, despite the palpable danger. "And whatever happens, do not run." Talia nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She clutched the shawl around her shoulders, her fingers digging into the rough wool, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and a strange, exhilarating sense of anticipation. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment she would face the shadows of her past, the creatures of the curse, the reality of the hunt. The scent of pine, of wolf, of Caspian, filled her senses, a strange, comforting anchor amidst the terror that threatened to consume her. The battle, she knew, was about to begin. Chapter 6. A Glimmer of Forbidden Trust. The monstrous wolves stalked forward, their movements sinuous and predatory, their red eyes burning with a malevolent hunger. They circled Caspian and Talia, their growls a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the very ground. The air crackled with tension, with the raw, primal energy of the hunt. Caspian stood firm, his body a wall between Talia and the creatures, his knife held ready. He moved with a fluid grace, his eyes constantly tracking the wolves, anticipating their every move. He was a warrior, a hunter, born and bred to fight the shadows, to protect the innocent. "They are drawn to your blood, Talia," he said, his voice low and steady, a calming presence amidst the growing terror.
"To the power it holds. They want to extinguish it, to keep the curse alive."
Talia's heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. Yet, watching Caspian, seeing the unwavering determination in his eyes, the strength in his stance, she felt a flicker of courage, a spark of defiance. She would not cower. She would not run. She would stand her ground, beside this man who had sworn to protect her. The wolves lunged, their movements lightning fast, their fangs bared, their claws extended. Caspian met their attack with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. He moved like a whirlwind, his knife a blur of silver in the moonlight, deflecting their attacks, parrying their blows. He was a master of his craft, his movements honed by years of training, by countless battles fought in the shadows. He fought with a skill and a grace that belied the brutal nature of the combat, a dance of death played out beneath the silent gaze of the moon. Talia watched, mesmerized, her fear mingled with a strange sense of admiration. She had never seen anything like this before, this raw, primal display of power, this unwavering commitment to protect. It awakened something within her, a dormant strength, a warrior spirit she hadn't known she possessed. One of the wolves managed to slip past Caspian's guard, its claws raking across his arm, drawing blood. He grunted in pain, but he didn't falter. He spun, his knife flashing, and with a swift, precise movement, he drove the blade into the creature's flank. The wolf howled in agony, its body convulsing, its red eyes dimming. It collapsed to the ground, its form dissolving into shadow, returning to the darkness from whence it came. The remaining two wolves hesitated, their bloodlust momentarily tempered by the fate of their companion. Caspian seized the opportunity. He pressed his attack, his movements even faster, even more ferocious. He was a whirlwind of steel and fury, a force of nature unleashed. He drove one wolf back, forcing it to retreat into the shadows. The other lunged at him again, its jaws snapping shut inches from his throat. Caspian sidestepped the attack, his knife finding its mark, piercing the creature's heart. The wolf let out a final, agonizing howl, its body dissolving into shadow, leaving only the lingering scent of decay and the echo of its dying cry. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Caspian's ragged breathing and the frantic beating of Talia's heart. He stood there, his chest heaving, his body covered in sweat and blood, his knife dripping with the ichor of the vanquished creatures. He turned to Talia, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a mixture of relief and something else. Something that looked like tenderness. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Talia nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She was shaken, terrified, but also strangely exhilarated. She had faced the shadows, and she had survived. Caspian lowered his knife, his body relaxing slightly, the tension draining from his muscles. He looked exhausted, wounded, but also strangely beautiful. The moonlight illuminated his face, revealing the lines of strain, the beads of sweat on his brow, the blood that stained his armor. It was a face that had seen battle, that had faced death, and had emerged victorious. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. It was a gesture of comfort, of reassurance, of something more. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes filling with tears. She meant it not just for the immediate rescue, but for the feeling of safety he gave her, for the first time since her memory had vanished. He smiled, a rare, fleeting smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, less burdened. It was a smile that reached his eyes, illuminating their golden depths, revealing a flicker of vulnerability beneath his hardened exterior. "It is my duty," he said, his voice softening. "And my privilege." His words, his touch, his smile, sent a wave of warmth through Talia, melting the icy fear that had gripped her heart. She felt a connection to him, a bond forged in the crucible of danger, a glimmer of forbidden trust in a world of shadows and uncertainty. It was a trust that defied logic, that transcended the boundaries of their situation, a trust that whispered of something deeper, something more profound. It was a trust, she realized, with a growing sense of both wonder and trepidation, that could easily blossom into something more. Something dangerous. Something forbidden. Something inevitable. Chapter 7. The Curse of the Silver Blood. The adrenaline of the fight slowly ebbed away, leaving Talia feeling shaky and weak. Caspin, despite his own injuries, guided her towards the base of the Whisper Stone, a massive, imposing monolith that seemed to hum with a palpable energy. The air around it was thick with a strange, almost electric charge, making the hairs on her arms stand on end. He helped her sit down on a relatively smooth patch of ground, her back against the cool, rough surface of the stone. He then tended to his own wounds, cleaning the gashes on his arm with a practiced efficiency, using a small vial of liquid he retrieved from a pouch at his belt. The liquid, she noticed, shimmered with a faint, silver glow. "What is that?" she asked, her voice still raspy from the aftermath of the encounter. He glanced at her, his golden eyes softening. "It's a healing salve," he said, "made from herbs and other things. It helps to close wounds, prevent infection. Other things." Talia sensed a hidden meaning in his words, a reluctance to reveal the full truth. It was clear that Caspin, and the world he inhabited, was steeped in secrets, in ancient lore that she was only just beginning to glimpse. He finished tending to his wounds, his movements swift and efficient. He then sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, a comforting presence in the chilling night air. "The Whisper Stone," he said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the towering rock formation. "It holds the memories of your ancestors, Talia. The memories of the curse." He reached out and placed his hand on the stone, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings that adorned its surface. The carvings, she noticed now, were similar to the symbols on his silver wristband, a language of ancient magic, of forgotten power. "The curse," he continued, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries, was born of betrayal, of a love forbidden, a pact broken. He turned to her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a sadness that mirrored her own fragmented soul. "Your ancestors, the Corvin line, were once powerful wielders of magic. They lived in harmony with the forest, with the creatures of the night. But one of them fell in love with a being from the shadows, a creature of darkness." He paused, his gaze shifting back to the Whisper Stone, as if drawing strength from its ancient presence. Their love was forbidden, a violation of the ancient laws. They made a pact, a blood oath, to be together forever. But the pact was broken. Betrayal followed, and the curse was unleashed. Talia felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest, a phantom echo of a long-forgotten heartbreak. She remembered the fleeting image she had seen earlier of a woman with silver hair, standing before a similar rock formation, her face contorted in anguish. It was her. It was an ancestor. The woman in my dream, she whispered, clutching her chest, trying to grasp the fleeting memory. She was part of this? Caspian nodded, his expression somber. She was Lyra Corvin, he said. The one who made the pact. The one who was betrayed. The one who unleashed the curse. Lyra Corvin. The name resonated with a deep, hidden truth within Talia. It was a name that echoed in her blood, in her bones, in her fragmented memories. What happened to her? She asked, her voice trembling. Caspian's gaze softened, his expression filled with a mixture of pity and regret. She was hunted, he said, by her own people, by the creatures of the forest, by the shadows she had sought to embrace. She died here, at the Whisper Stone, cursing her betrayers, cursing her bloodline, cursing the hunt. The curse. The hunt. It was all connected. Talia's amnesia, her fragmented memories, her sense of being pursued, it was all part of a larger story, a tragic tale of love, betrayal, and vengeance that had spanned centuries. And the curse affects me? She asked, the words a choked whisper. Caspian nodded. It affects all those who carry the Corvin blood, he said. It makes them vulnerable to the shadows, to the creatures of the hunt. It makes them targets. He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her, a strange, comforting sensation amidst the growing despair. He turned her hand over, his thumb tracing the faint lines on her palm, the intricate network of veins that pulsed beneath her skin. But your blood, it also holds the power to break the curse, he said, his voice filled with a glimmer of hope. To heal the wound that has festered for generations. To end the hunt, once and for all. He looked at her, his golden eyes shining with a fierce determination, an unwavering belief in her power. You are the key, Talia, he repeated, his voice firm, his grip tightening on her hand. You are the one who can set us all free. His words stirred the embers of something long forgotten in her. Not a memory, not yet, but resolve. She did not know how, she did not understand the details. But looking at him, at the earnest and hopeful intensity in his eyes, she felt a glimmer, a flicker, a spark of something that said, maybe. Chapter 8. Running through the misted veil. Caspian's words hung in the air, a heavy weight of responsibility settling on Talia's shoulders. She, the key? She, the one to break a centuries-old curse? The idea seemed ludicrous, impossible. She was just an ordinary woman, a woman with a fractured memory, a woman who had spent years running from shadows she couldn't understand. Yet, looking into Caspian's eyes, seeing the unwavering belief in his gaze, she felt a flicker of something. Hope? Courage? Perhaps a bit of both.
How?
She asked, her voice barely a whisper, the question echoing her earlier doubts. How can I possibly break a curse I don't even understand? Caspian smiled, a small, reassuring smile that softened his features, making him look younger, less burdened. By remembering, he said, his voice gentle. By embracing the truth of who you are, of what your ancestors were. He released her hand, his touch lingering for a moment longer than necessary, leaving a warmth that spread through her arm, her chest. He then stood up, extending a hand to help her to her feet. Come, he said.
There is more to see.
More to learn. Talia took his hand, his grip strong and reassuring. He pulled her up, his touch sending another jolt of electricity through her. She felt a strange, unsettling mix of fear and something else. Something akin to attraction. It was an attraction that defied logic, that transcended the boundaries of their situation, an attraction that whispered of a deeper connection, a forbidden desire. He led her around the base of the Whisper Stone, towards a narrow opening hidden behind a curtain of thick, gnarled vines. The opening, she realized, was the entrance to a cave, a dark, mysterious passage that seemed to beckon her, to challenge her. What is this place? She asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. It is a sanctuary, Caspian said, his voice low. A place where your ancestors practiced their magic. a place where the truth is hidden. He pushed aside the vines, revealing the dark, gaping maw of the cave. The air that emanated from it was cold, damp, and heavy with the scent of earth, of ancient stone, of something else. Something magical, something dangerous. Caspian drew a small, silver lantern from his belt, its light flickering, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. He entered first, his body a shield between Talia and the unknown, his hand held out to guide her. Talia hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The cave was dark, forbidding, a symbol of the unknown, of the secrets that awaited her. Yet she knew she had to go in. She had to face the shadows, to embrace the truth, to find the answers she had been searching for. She took a deep breath, the cold air stinging her lungs, and stepped into the cave, following Caspian, following the flickering light, following the path towards a forgotten past, a hidden truth. The cave was narrow at first, forcing them to walk single file, Caspian leading the way, his lantern casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something almost metallic, like the tang of old blood. As they walked deeper, the cave began to widen, opening up into a large chamber. The walls of the chamber were covered in intricate carvings, similar to the ones on the Whisper Stone, a language of ancient magic, of forgotten power. In the center of the chamber, there was a large, circular pool of water, its surface still and reflective, like a mirror. The water, Talia noticed, shimmered with a faint, silver glow, similar to the liquid in Caspian's healing vial. Caspian stopped beside the pool, his gaze fixed on the shimmering water. "This is the pool of memories," he said, his voice hushed, reverent. "It holds the echoes of the past, the whispers of your ancestors." He turned to Talia, his golden eyes searching hers. "Look into the water," he said. "Let it show you the truth." Talia hesitated. She was afraid of what she might see, of what she might remember. But she knew she had to do it. She had to face her past, to understand her present, to shape her future. She took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs, and stepped towards the pool, her gaze fixed on the shimmering water. She felt a tremor of anticipation. As she looked, the smooth surface of the pool seemed to ripple and blur. The silver glow intensified, and out of the light, an image began to form. Not of her, but of Lyra. A scream ripped through the silence, a raw and feral sound that startled both of them. Suddenly, a figure burst through the cave entrance, human, yet feral, eyes blazing red. Hunters, but not of Caspian's kind. The Corvin Witch. He roared, and her pet. Others followed, weapons drawn. Caspian shoved Talia behind him.
"Run,"
he yelled, his voice rough with urgency. "Get out of here."
"Go."
The pool, the vision, everything else faded. All that mattered was escape. Chapter 9. Heartbeats in the Silent Forest. Talia didn't hesitate. She turned and fled, stumbling through the narrow passage, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. Caspian's roar of defiance echoed behind her, followed by the clash of steel, the guttural growls of the attackers. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her only thought was to escape, to survive. The passage seemed endless, twisting and turning, the darkness pressing in on her, suffocating her. She ran blindly, her hands outstretched, feeling her way along the cold, damp walls. The sounds of the fight faded behind her, replaced by the frantic rhythm of her own breathing, the pounding of her heart. She burst out of the cave, into the cool night air, her lungs burning, her legs aching. She didn't stop. She kept running, deeper into the forest, away from the Whisper Stone, away from the hunters, away from the danger. The trees loomed around her, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out to grab her. The moonlight filtered through the dense canopy in dappled patterns, creating an eerie, almost surreal landscape. She stumbled over roots, tripped on fallen branches, but she didn't slow down. She had to keep going. She had to get away. She had no idea where she was going, no plan, no destination. She was running on pure instinct, driven by a primal fear, a desperate need to survive. She was alone, again, lost in the darkness, hunted. But this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't just running from shadows she couldn't understand. This time, she was running for something. For Caspian, for the hope he represented, for the chance to break the curse, to end the hunt, to finally find peace. She ran until she could run no more, her body exhausted, her lungs screaming for air. She collapsed at the base of a giant oak tree, its trunk thick and gnarled, its branches reaching up towards the sky like the arms of a protective guardian. She leaned against the rough bark, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. She closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The image of Caspian, fighting the hunters, his face contorted in a snarl of defiance, flashed before her eyes. She felt a pang of guilt, of regret, for leaving him behind. But she knew he had wanted her to run, to survive. He had sacrificed himself to save her. Tears welled up in her eyes, hot and stinging. She wiped them away angrily, refusing to give in to despair. She had to be strong. She had to survive. For Caspian. For herself. She listened to the sounds of the forest, trying to discern any sign of pursuit. The wind whispered through the leaves, the owls hooted in the distance, the crickets chirped their monotonous song. But there was no sound of footsteps, no sound of growls, no sound of the hunt. She was safe for now. But she knew it wouldn't last. The hunters would be looking for her. They would not give up. She had to find a way to escape, to fight back, to break the curse. She looked up at the moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky. It was a hunter's moon, a moon that illuminated the path of the hunt, a moon that cast long, dark shadows. But it was also a moon that offered a glimmer of hope, a beacon of light in the darkness. She remembered Caspian's words, his unwavering belief in her power. She was the key, he had said. She was the one who could break the curse. She had to find a way. She had to remember. She closed her eyes again, trying to recall the fleeting image she had seen in the pool of memories, the image of Lyra Corvin, her ancestor, the woman who had unleashed the curse. She had to understand what had happened, what had gone wrong, what she had to do to set things right. A sudden sound startled her, a soft rustling in the undergrowth nearby. She tensed, her heart leaping into her throat, her senses on high alert. Was it the hunters? Had they found her? She held her breath, listening intently, her eyes scanning the shadows. The rustling came again, closer this time. And then, a figure emerged from the trees, a tall, broad-shouldered silhouette against the moonlit forest. It was Caspian. He was alive. Relief washed over her, so intense, so profound, that it almost brought her to her knees. She stood up, her legs shaky, her body trembling with a mixture of joy and disbelief. He saw her, and a flicker of relief crossed his features, quickly masked by a stoic expression. He walked towards her, his movements slow and deliberate, his golden eyes searching hers. He was wounded, she noticed. His arm was bandaged, his clothes were torn and stained with blood, but he was alive. He was here. "Talia," he said, his voice rough, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He sounded exhausted and pained, and her heart clenched in her chest for him. "Caspian," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You're alive." He nodded, a small, weary smile touching his lips. "I told you," he said, his voice softening. "I would protect you." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. It was a gesture of comfort, of reassurance, of something more. Something forbidden, and yet she could not help but to lean, almost imperceptibly, into that contact. "We must keep moving. The hunt is far from over." His voice was rough and soft, all at once. Chapter 10. The Price of a Fated Bond. Caspian's words, though spoken softly, carried the weight of urgency, of a relentless pursuit that wouldn't cease. Talia nodded, her own exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the face of the renewed threat. The relief of seeing him alive was quickly replaced by the grim reality of their situation.
They
knew about the pool, she said, her voice trembling, remembering the hunter's words, their knowledge of her lineage.
How?
Caspian's expression darkened, his golden eyes hardening with a flicker of anger. There are spies everywhere, he said, his voice low and bitter. Those who serve the shadows, who seek to maintain the curse. He looked around, his senses alert, his body tense. The forest, which had moments ago seemed a refuge, now felt like a trap, its shadows hiding unseen dangers. We need to find somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere we can rest, regroup, and plan our next move. He led her deeper into the forest, away from the Whisper Stone, away from the path they had taken earlier. He moved with a practiced ease, his knowledge of the terrain evident, his senses attuned to the subtle nuances of a night. Talia followed, her legs aching, her body weary, but her spirit fueled by a newfound determination. She would not give up. She would not let the hunters win. She would fight for her survival, for Caspian's safety, for the chance to break the curse. As they walked, she found herself studying him, observing the way he moved, the way he scanned the shadows, the way he held himself. He was a warrior, a hunter, but he was also something more. He was a protector, a guardian, a man who had risked his life to save hers. She felt a growing connection to him, a bond forged in the crucible of danger, a bond that transcended the boundaries of their situation. It was a bond that whispered of something deeper, something more profound, something forbidden. She remembered the fleeting touch of his hand on her cheek, the warmth of his gaze, the tenderness in his voice. It was a tenderness that belied his hardened exterior, a tenderness that hinted at a vulnerability, a hidden pain. "Caspian," she said, her voice soft, breaking the silence. "Why are you doing this? Why are you risking your life for me?" He glanced at her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite decipher. He hesitated for a moment, as if struggling to find the right words. "It is my duty," he said, his voice low, his gaze shifting away. "To protect those who carry the Corvin blood. To fight the shadows. To end the hunt." But Talia sensed there was more to it than that. His words, though true, didn't fully explain the unwavering commitment she saw in his eyes, the fierce protectiveness he displayed, the tenderness he couldn't quite hide. "There's more to it than that, isn't there?" She pressed, her voice gentle, encouraging. He stopped, turning to face her, his expression conflicted. He looked at her for a long moment, his golden eyes searching hers, as if trying to decide whether to trust her, whether to reveal the truth. "The Corvin line and my own are intertwined," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "Bound by an ancient oath, a fated connection." He paused, his gaze never leaving hers, and she could feel his trepidation. "My ancestors swore to protect yours," he confessed, his voice tight with restrained emotion. "To guide them, to help them break the curse." His words echoed with a great burden, a duty bound not just by tradition but also by a profound history. "It is more than duty, Talia," he admitted, his voice husky. "It is destiny. Destiny." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications, with the weight of centuries, with the promise of something both terrifying and inevitable. A fated bond, a connection that transcended time, that defied logic, that whispered of a love that was both forbidden and meant to be. Talia felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear and excitement. She looked at Caspian, at the hunter, at the protector, at the man who was bound to her by destiny. And she knew, with a certainty that defied her fragmented memory, that her life, her fate, was irrevocably intertwined with his. The price of that fated bond, she suspected, was yet to be fully revealed. But she knew, with a chilling premonition, that it would be steep. Chapter 11. Where the Wild Roses Bloom. The weight of Caspian's revelation settled heavily upon them, a silent acknowledgement of the forces that bound them together, forces far older and more powerful than either of them fully understood. They continued their journey through the forest, the unspoken connection between them a palpable presence, a thread of destiny weaving its way through the darkness. Caspian led her to a small, secluded clearing, hidden deep within a thicket of ancient trees. A tiny stream gurgled nearby, its gentle murmur a soothing counterpoint to the lingering tension of their escape. The clearing was bathed in the soft glow of the moon, which filtered through the leaves, creating an ethereal, almost magical atmosphere. "We can rest here for a while," Caspian said, his voice low, his gaze scanning the perimeter of the clearing, ensuring their safety. "It's relatively hidden, and the stream provides fresh water." Talia nodded, grateful for the respite, for the chance to catch her breath, to gather her strength. She sank down onto a patch of soft moss, her back against the trunk of a towering oak, its branches reaching up towards the sky like the arms of a protective guardian. Caspian sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, a comforting presence in the chilling night air. He removed his leather armor, revealing the toned muscles of his arms and chest, the scars that marked his skin, testaments to battles fought, wounds endured. He began to tend to his injuries again, cleaning the gashes on his arm with the shimmering liquid from his vial. Talia watched him, her gaze drawn to the lines of his face, the strength in his hands, the vulnerability that flickered in his golden eyes. "Your ancestors," she said, her voice soft, breaking the silence. "You said they swore to protect mine."
Why?
Caspian glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. He finished tending to his wounds, his movements swift and efficient. He then sat back, leaning against the tree, his gaze fixed on the moonlit clearing. "It was a debt," he said, his voice low, his words heavy with the weight of centuries. "A debt of honor, a debt of blood." He paused, his gaze shifting to her, his golden eyes searching hers. "Long ago, before the curse, before the hunt, your ancestors, the Corvin line, saved my ancestors from a great danger. From a creature of darkness, a being of immense power." He looked away, his gaze fixed on the distant trees, his mind lost in the echoes of the past. "My ancestors swore an oath, a blood oath, to repay that debt, to protect the Corvin line, to guide them, to help them should they ever need it." He turned back to her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "And now that time has come." Talia felt a shiver run down her spine, a sense of awe and wonder at the depth of the connection between them, at the weight of the history that bound them together. It was a connection that transcended time, that defied logic, that whispered of a destiny she was only just beginning to understand. "So, it's not just duty?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else. Something akin to hope. Caspian met her gaze, his golden eyes holding hers captive. He hesitated for a moment, as if struggling to find the right words, as if afraid to reveal too much. "No," he finally said, his voice low and husky, his gaze unwavering. "It's not just duty." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. It was a gesture of comfort, of reassurance, of something more. "There is something else," he said, his voice barely audible, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Something stronger. Something I don't fully understand." He leaned closer, his breath warm on her face, the scent of pine and wolf intoxicating her senses. Talia's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the growing intensity of the moment. She felt a pull towards him, a magnetic force that drew her in, that made her want to close the distance between them, to feel his lips on hers. But before she could, he pulled back, abruptly, his expression conflicted, his golden eyes clouded with doubt and regret. "We shouldn't," he said, his voice rough, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's forbidden. Dangerous. Forbidden. Dangerous." The words echoed the warnings she had heard before, the whispers of a curse, of a love that could destroy them both. He stood up, moving away from her, putting distance between them, as if trying to break the invisible bond that connected them. He walked to the edge of the clearing, his back to her, his body tense, his shoulders hunched. Talia watched him, her heart aching, her body yearning for his touch. She understood his reluctance, his fear. But she also felt a deep, undeniable connection to him, a bond that went beyond duty, beyond destiny, a bond that whispered of a love that was both terrifying and inevitable. As she watched him, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Growing near the stream, bathed in the soft moonlight, were a cluster of wild roses, their petals a delicate shade of pink, their fragrance sweet and intoxicating. They were a symbol of beauty, of love, of resilience, blooming in the heart of the darkness, a reminder that even in the midst of the hunt, even in the face of danger, hope and love could still blossom. They were a fragile, yet powerful testament to the enduring power of the heart, a silent promise of a future that could be, if only they were brave enough to reach for it. Chapter 12. Scars Beneath the Surface. The image of the wild roses, blooming in the moonlight, lingered in Talia's mind, a fragile symbol of hope amidst the darkness that surrounded them. She watched Caspian, his back to her, his body tense with the weight of his unspoken emotions, his internal struggle. She understood his reluctance, his fear of the forbidden connection between them, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt, the yearning for something more than duty, more than destiny. She stood up, her legs stiff from sitting, and walked towards him, her footsteps silent on the soft moss. She stopped a few feet behind him, her gaze fixed on the broad expanse of his back, on the scars that marked his skin, testaments to battles fought, wounds endured. "Caspian," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her presence, but she knew he had heard her. She could sense his awareness of her, the subtle shift in his posture, the slight tremor in his shoulders. I understand," she continued, her voice gentle, her words sincere. "I understand why you're afraid. I am too." She paused, taking a deep breath, gathering her courage. "But I can't deny what I feel," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't deny the connection between us." She reached out, her hand hovering inches from his back, her fingers trembling with a mixture of fear and longing. She hesitated for a moment, then gently placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch light, tentative. He flinched, slightly, at her touch, but he didn't pull away. She felt the warmth of his skin beneath her palm, the tension in his muscles, the scars that marked his skin. "Caspian," she said again, her voice firmer now, her touch more confident. "Look at me." He slowly turned, his golden eyes meeting hers, their depths filled with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite decipher: pain, longing, regret, and something else. Something that looked like love. It was a love that was etched on his face, in the lines around his eyes, in the set of his jaw, in the scars that marked his skin. It was a love that had been hidden, suppressed, denied, but it was there, nonetheless, a flickering flame in the darkness. I can't," he whispered, his voice rough, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's too dangerous. For both of us." "Dangerous?" she asked, her voice soft, her gaze unwavering. "Or forbidden?" He didn't answer, his silence a confession in itself. He looked away, his gaze fixed on the distant trees, his mind struggling with a conflict within him. Talia stepped closer, closing the distance between them. She reached out and gently cupped his face in her hands, her fingers tracing the lines of his jaw, the stubble that shadowed his cheeks, the scars that marked his skin. "Look at me, Caspian," she repeated, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. "Tell me you don't feel it too." He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a raw, vulnerable emotion that mirrored her own. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His eyes told her everything. He leaned in, slowly, hesitantly, as if drawn to her by an invisible force. Talia met him halfway, her heart pounding in her chest, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the growing intensity of the moment. Their lips met, softly at first, tentatively, a tentative exploration of a forbidden desire. It was a kiss that was both gentle and passionate, a kiss that spoke of longing, of fear, of a connection that transcended time, that defied logic, that whispered of a love that was both terrifying and inevitable. The kiss deepened, their bodies pressing closer, their arms wrapping around each other, seeking comfort, seeking solace, seeking a connection that had been denied for far too long. It was a kiss that unleashed a torrent of emotions, a flood of memories, a glimpse of a future that could be, if only they were brave enough to embrace it. But as quickly as it began, it ended. Caspian pulled away, abruptly, his expression filled with guilt, with regret, with a renewed sense of fear. "No," he said, his voice hoarse, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "We can't. We mustn't." He turned away from her, walking towards a stream, his back to her, his body tense, his shoulders hunched. He stood there for a long moment, his silence heavy with the weight of his unspoken emotions, his internal struggle. Talia watched him, her heart aching, her body yearning for his touch. She understood his fear, his reluctance. But she also knew that the connection between them was too strong to deny, too powerful to ignore. The scars beneath the surface, both his and hers, were a testament to the battles they had fought, the wounds they had endured. But they were also a reminder that even in the midst of pain, even in the face of danger, love and hope could still blossom, like the wild roses blooming in the moonlight. The question was, would they be brave enough to let it? The kiss and the abrupt end had changed things. This was not just about a curse or a hunt. This was about them. Chapter 13. The Unveiling of Ancient Secrets. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged with unspoken emotions. Talia watched Caspian, his back to her, his silhouette outlined against the moonlit stream, his internal struggle evident in the tense set of his shoulders. She wanted to reach out to him, to bridge the distance he had created, but she hesitated, unsure of how to navigate the complex web of duty, destiny, and forbidden desire that bound them together. Finally, Caspian turned, his golden eyes meeting hers across the clearing. His expression was guarded, his emotions carefully masked, but Talia could see the lingering traces of their kiss, the vulnerability he had momentarily allowed himself to reveal. "We need to focus," he said, his voice rough, his tone more formal than before, as if trying to reassert control, to rebuild the walls he had let down. "On the curse. On the hunt." Talia nodded, understanding his need for distance, for control. She, too, needed to regain her composure, to focus on the task ahead. But she couldn't ignore the shift that had occurred between them, the undeniable connection that had been revealed, the forbidden desire that had been ignited. "The pool of memories," she said, her voice soft, reminding him of their interrupted mission. "You said it held the answers. The truth about the curse." Caspian nodded, his gaze shifting towards the direction of the Whisper Stone, a dark, imposing monolith in the distance. "Yes," he said, "but it's guarded by those who serve the shadows. We need a plan." They spent the next few hours discussing their options, strategizing, weighing the risks. Caspian, with his knowledge of the hunt, of the creatures that serve the shadows, outlined the dangers they faced. Talia, with her growing understanding of her own lineage, of the power she held, offered insights, suggestions, her mind surprisingly sharp, her instincts honed by the constant threat of danger. As they talked, Talia noticed a change in Caspian. He was still guarded, still cautious, but he was also more open, more willing to share, to collaborate. He treated her as an equal, a partner, not just a charge to be protected. "There's an old legend," Caspian said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the small fire he had built, about a hidden passage. A way to reach the pool of memories without being detected. He paused, his expression thoughtful. "It's said to be guarded by something else. Something ancient, something powerful, something not of the shadows. What is it?" Talia asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. Caspian hesitated, his golden eyes flickering with a mixture of uncertainty and respect. "A guardian," he said. "A creature of the forest, a being of immense power." A spirit wolf. A spirit wolf. The words sent a shiver down Talia's spine, a mixture of fear and fascination. She remembered the fleeting image she had seen in the pool of memories, the image of Lyra Corvin, her ancestor. Had she interacted with this spirit wolf? The legend says, Caspian continued, that the spirit wolf only allows those who are worthy to pass. Those who are pure of heart, those who seek to end the curse, not exploit it. Worthy. The word echoed in Talia's mind, a challenge, a test. Was she worthy? Could she prove herself to this ancient guardian, this spirit wolf? We have to try, she said, her voice firm, her determination unwavering. We have to find this hidden passage. We have to reach the pool of memories. Caspian nodded, his golden eyes meeting hers, their depths filled with a renewed sense of purpose, of hope. He saw her resolve, her courage, and it seemed to bolster his own. Then we leave at dawn, he said, his voice resolute. We face the guardian. We uncover the truth. As dawn approached, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, they set off, their steps determined, their hearts filled with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. They were venturing into the unknown, facing dangers they could barely imagine, but they were doing it together, bound by a shared purpose, by a fated connection, by a forbidden desire that simmered beneath the surface, a silent promise of a future that could be, if only they were brave enough to reach for it. The ancient secrets, Talia knew, were about to be unveiled. And she, with Caspian at her side, was ready to face them. The weight remained, she noticed in herself, of the kiss, the contact. They hadn't talked of it, but she knew. And she was relatively sure that he knew that she knew. Chapter 14. Betrayal under the crimson sky. The journey to the hidden passage was fraught with peril. They moved stealthily through the forest, Caspian leading the way, his senses alert, his body tense, constantly scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. Talia followed close behind, her own senses heightened, her awareness of the forest, of its hidden threats, growing with each passing hour. They encountered several patrols of the shadow creatures, grotesque parodies of wolves, their eyes burning with malevolent red light. Caspian dispatched them swiftly and efficiently, his movements fluid and graceful, his knife a blur of silver in the dim light. He fought with a ferocity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, protecting Talia with an unwavering commitment that sent a shiver down her spine, a mixture of fear and something else. Something akin to admiration, to gratitude, to a deepening affection. As they neared the location of the hidden passage, the air grew thick with a strange, almost palpable energy, a sense of ancient power, of waiting. The trees here were older, taller, their branches gnarled and twisted, their roots reaching deep into the earth, drawing on the secrets of the past. We're close, Caspian said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on a towering rock formation that loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the crimson sky of the setting sun. The passage is behind that waterfall. He pointed towards a cascading waterfall that tumbled down the face of the rock formation, its roar deafening, its spray creating a shimmering mist that hung in the air. The waterfall, Talia realized, was a natural barrier, concealing the entrance to the hidden passage, protecting it from prying eyes. They approached the waterfall cautiously, their steps slow and deliberate, their senses on high alert. As they drew closer, Talia felt a presence, a powerful, ancient presence that seemed to emanate from the very rocks, from the water, from the air itself. It was the guardian, the spirit wolf. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, a creature of breathtaking beauty and power. It was a wolf, but unlike any wolf Talia had ever seen. Its fur was pure white, its eyes a luminous silver, its form shimmering, almost translucent, as if it were made of moonlight and mist. It stood there, blocking their path, its gaze fixed on them, its presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It was a creature of legend, a being of immense power, a guardian of the ancient secrets. Caspian stepped forward, his body tense, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife, but he didn't draw it. He knew that this was not a creature to be fought, but to be respected. "We seek passage," Caspian said, his voice clear and respectful, his gaze unwavering. "We seek the pool of memories. We seek to end the curse." The spirit wolf didn't move, didn't speak, but Talia felt its gaze pierce through her, to the core of her being, assessing her worth, her intentions, her heart. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear and anticipation. The spirit wolf let out a low growl, a sound that resonated deep within her chest, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very ground she stood on. It was a sound of warning, of challenge, of judgment. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the clearing, a voice that was both familiar and unexpected. "Well, well, well," the voice said, its tone laced with malice and mockery. "Look what we have here." The Corvin witch and her pet. Talia turned, her heart leaping into her throat, her eyes widening in disbelief. It was one of the hunters, one of the men who had attacked them in the cave. But he was not alone. Standing beside him, a smug smile on his face, was another hunter. A hunter Talia recognized. A hunter she had seen, briefly, talking to Caspian earlier that day, while she gathered herbs. A hunter Caspian had called friend. "Rorik?" she stammered. "Betrayal." The word echoed in Talia's mind, a cold, sharp knife twisting in her gut. Caspian's friend. A traitor.
A spy.
Caspian's face was a mask of shock and fury. He turned to Rorik, his golden eyes blazing with anger, his voice a low growl.
"You?"
he said, his voice filled with disbelief and betrayal.
"Why?"
Rorik laughed, a cold, heartless laugh that sent a shiver down Talia's spine.
"Why not?" he said.
"The shadows offer rewards.
Power.
And you, my friend, were always too sentimental. Too attached to this Corvin witch." He gestured towards Talia, his eyes filled with contempt.
"She's the key, you see," he said.
"The key to the curse. The key to power." He stepped toward them, a glint in his eyes. "And we intend to use that key." The spirit wolf, forgotten for a moment, let out a deafening roar, its form shimmering, its eyes burning with a fierce, protective light. But it was too late. The hunters attacked. Chapter 15. The Howl of a Broken Heart. The clearing erupted in chaos. Caspian roared his defiance, his knife flashing in the fading light as he met Rorik's attack head-on. The clash of steel echoed through the air, a brutal symphony of betrayal and rage. Talia, stunned by Rorik's treachery, found herself facing the other hunter, his eyes burning with the same malevolent red light as the shadow creatures. She had no weapon, no training, only her instincts and a desperate will to survive. She dodged his initial lunge, her movements surprisingly agile, fueled by adrenaline and a primal fear. She remembered Caspian's lessons, his guidance on how to move, how to anticipate an attack. But the hunter was relentless, his attacks swift and brutal. He cornered her against the rock face, his knife raised, his face contorted in a snarl of triumph. Talia closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable, her heart pounding in her chest, a frantic drumbeat of terror. Suddenly, a deafening roar pierced through the air, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. The spirit wolf, its form shimmering, its eyes blazing with silver fire, launched itself at the hunter, knocking him off his feet, sending him sprawling to the ground. The wolf stood over him, its fangs bared, its growl a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the very ground. It was a creature of immense power, a guardian of the ancient secrets, and it had chosen to protect Talia. But the moment of reprieve was short-lived. Caspian, locked in a fierce battle with Rorik, cried out in pain. Talia turned to see Rorik's knife buried deep in Caspian's side, his blood staining the crimson sky a darker shade of red.
"Caspian!"
she screamed, her voice choked with horror and despair. Caspian stumbled, his body weakened by the blow, his face contorted in pain. Rorik, seizing the opportunity, raised his knife again, ready to deliver the final blow. But before he could, Talia acted. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, by a fierce, protective love for the man who had risked his life for her. She grabbed a loose rock from the ground and hurled it at Rorik with all her might. The rock struck him on the head, a sickening thud that echoed through the clearing. He staggered, his eyes glazing over, his body collapsing to the ground, unconscious, or perhaps dead. Talia rushed to Caspian's side, her hands trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. He was lying on the ground, his body racked with pain, his breathing shallow and ragged. "Caspian," she whispered, her voice choked with tears.
"Hold on.
"Please hold on." She knelt beside him, gently cradling his head in her lap, her fingers brushing through his hair, her touch soothing, comforting. She tore a strip of cloth from her dress and pressed it against the wound, trying to staunch the flow of blood. The spirit wolf, its task completed, approached them, its form shimmering, its silver eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else. Something that looked like compassion. It nudged Caspian gently with its snout, as if offering comfort, as if acknowledging his sacrifice. Then, it turned to Talia, its gaze piercing through her, to the core of her being. It let out a low howl, a mournful, heart-wrenching sound that echoed through the clearing, a sound that spoke of loss, of grief, of a broken heart. It was a howl that resonated deep within Talia, awakening a primal sorrow, a sense of profound loss. The howl triggered something within her, a surge of power, a flood of memories. She saw flashes of Lyra Corvin, her ancestor, standing before the pool of memories, her face contorted in anguish, her heart broken by betrayal. She saw the curse being unleashed, the cycle of violence and vengeance being set in motion. She understood now. She understood the truth of her lineage, the power she held, the responsibility she carried. She was the key, not just to breaking the curse, but to healing the wound, to restoring balance, to ending the hunt. But at what cost? Caspian's breathing grew shallower, his body weaker, his life fading away. Talia held him close, her tears falling on his face, her heart breaking with each agonizing breath he took. She looked at the spirit wolf, her eyes pleading, her voice desperate. "Help him," she whispered. "Please help him." The spirit wolf gazed at her, and, for a split second, she sees an understanding, an acknowledgement, pass through the ancient eyes. The sound was not just a howl of grief, but of recognition. The curse was not just a sentence, it was a connection. And now, it was hers to bear. The betrayal had shattered something, yes, but had also cemented something far, far stronger. Chapter 16. Rekindled Flames of Courage. The spirit wolf, its silver eyes filled with an ancient wisdom, lowered its head and gently nudged Caspian's wound with its snout. A faint, silver glow emanated from the wolf, enveloping Caspian's body in a shimmering light. Talia watched, mesmerized, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. She didn't know what the wolf was doing, what power it possessed, but she trusted it. She had to. Caspian's life hung in the balance. The silver glow intensified, then slowly faded. The spirit wolf stepped back, its gaze fixed on Caspian, its form shimmering in the fading light. Caspian's breathing, which had been shallow and ragged, grew stronger, steadier. His eyes, which had been glazed with pain, flickered open, their golden depths regaining their focus.
"Talia?"
he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "I'm here," she said, her voice choked with relief, her tears falling on his face. "I'm here." He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else. Something that looked like love. A love that had been tested, wounded, but not broken. The spirit wolf let out a low rumble, a sound of satisfaction, of approval. It then turned and walked towards the waterfall, its form disappearing into the mist, its presence fading into the ancient magic of the forest. Talia helped Caspian sit up, his body still weak, but his spirit rekindled. He looked at the wound on his side, his expression a mixture of surprise and awe. The bleeding had stopped, the wound partially closed, the skin around it shimmering with a faint, silver residue. The spirit wolf, he said, his voice filled with wonder. It healed me. Talia nodded, her heart overflowing with gratitude for the ancient guardian, for its compassion, for its power. She knew that they had been given a second chance, a reprieve from the brink of death. But the reprieve was temporary. The threat of the hunt, of the shadows, still loomed. Rorik's betrayal had shaken them, wounded them, but it had also strengthened their resolve, their determination to end the curse, to break the cycle of violence and vengeance. "We need to get to the pool of memories," Caspian said, his voice firmer now, his eyes filled with a renewed sense of purpose. "We need to uncover the truth. We need to finish this." Talia nodded, her own determination unwavering. She knew that the path ahead would be dangerous, that they would face more challenges, more threats. But she was no longer afraid. She had faced death, she had witnessed betrayal, and she had emerged stronger, more resilient, more determined than ever. She helped Caspian to his feet, his body leaning on hers for support. He was still weak, still wounded, but his spirit was unbroken. They stood there for a moment, their bodies touching, their gazes locked, their hearts beating in unison. They had shared a kiss, a moment of forbidden desire, a glimpse of a future that could be. But that future was uncertain, clouded by the threat of the hunt, by the weight of their destiny. We can't," Caspian said, his voice rough, his eyes filled with regret, echoing his earlier words, his earlier fears. But Talia shook her head, her gaze unwavering, her voice firm. "We can," she said. "And we will." She leaned in and kissed him, softly at first, tentatively, then with a growing passion, a fierce determination. It was a kiss that spoke of defiance, of hope, of a love that refused to be denied, a love that would not be broken. It was a kiss that sealed their fate, that bound them together, that ignited a flame of courage within them, a flame that would guide them through the darkness, towards the truth, towards a future they would fight for, together. They broke apart, their gazes locked, their hearts pounding. They knew that the path ahead would be perilous, that they would face unimaginable dangers. But they were ready. They were together. And they would not be defeated. Hand in hand, they turned towards the waterfall, towards the hidden passage, towards the pool of memories, towards the ancient secrets that awaited them. The crimson sky had faded to a deep indigo, the stars beginning to appear, twinkling like diamonds in the vast expanse of the night. It was a night for courage, for truth, for love. And Talia and Caspian were ready to embrace it, together. The rekindled flame, she knew, would not be easily extinguished. It burned, not just with hope, but a profound sense of rightness. Chapter 17. The Gathering Storm of Destiny. The hidden passage behind the waterfall was narrow and damp, the air thick with the scent of moss and ancient stone. Caspian, still weakened by his injury but bolstered by Talia's unwavering support and the spirit wolf's healing touch, led the way, his lantern casting flickering shadows on the walls. Talia followed close behind, her hand resting on his back, a silent reassurance, a tangible connection. The passage sloped downwards, leading them deeper into the earth, into the heart of the mountain. The roar of the waterfall faded behind them, replaced by a profound silence, a sense of ancient stillness, of waiting. As they walked, Talia felt a growing sense of anticipation, of trepidation. She knew that they were approaching the pool of memories, the place where the truth of the curse, the secrets of her lineage, would be revealed. She was both eager and afraid, drawn to the answers yet fearful of what she might discover. After what seemed like an eternity, the passage opened up into a large, cavernous chamber. In the center of the chamber, bathed in a soft, ethereal glow, was the pool of memories, its surface still and reflective, like a mirror of time. The air in the chamber was heavy with magic, with a palpable energy that made the hairs on Talia's arms stand on end. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, similar to the ones on the Whisperstone, a language of ancient power, of forgotten lore. Caspian stopped beside the pool, his gaze fixed on the shimmering water. "This is it," he said, his voice hushed, reverent. "The place where your ancestors made their pact. The place where the curse was unleashed." Talia stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, her gaze drawn to the pool, to its mesmerizing surface. She felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing her in, beckoning her to gaze into its depths, to uncover the secrets of her past. What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her trepidation growing. Caspian turned to her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a mixture of encouragement and concern. "Look into the water," he said. "Let it show you the truth. Let it guide you." Talia took a deep breath, steeling her nerves, and gazed into the pool. The surface rippled, the shimmering light intensified, and images began to form, swirling, coalescing, revealing scenes from a distant past. She saw Lyra Corvin, her ancestor, a beautiful woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, standing before the Whisper Stone, her face filled with love and passion. She saw the creature of darkness, the one Lyra had fallen in love with, a being of immense power and seductive charm. She saw their forbidden love, their secret meetings, their passionate embrace. She saw the pact they made, a blood oath, to be together forever. She saw the betrayal, the creature of darkness turning on Lyra, using her, exploiting her power for his own selfish gain. She saw Lyra's anguish, her heartbreak, her rage. She saw her curse the creature, curse her betrayers, curse her bloodline, unleash the hunt. The images shifted, swirling faster, revealing generations of Corvins, hunted, persecuted, their lives filled with fear and violence. She saw the cycle of vengeance, the endless pursuit, the constant threat of the shadows. Then, the images focused on her own life, her fragmented memories. She saw the city ablaze, the man's anguished cry, the chilling glint of steel. She saw herself, younger, running, fleeing, escaping the hunt. She understood now. She understood the truth of her past, the burden she carried, the destiny she was meant to fulfill. She was the key, not just to breaking the curse, but to healing the wound, to restoring balance, to ending the cycle of violence. The images faded, the pool returning to its still, reflective surface. Talia stepped back, her body trembling, her mind reeling from the flood of memories, from the weight of the truth. I remember, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I remember everything." Caspian put a comforting hand on her back, and she leaned into his touch. Before either could speak, a low growl echoed from the entrance of the cave. Not of a shadow creature, but of something powerful, controlled. It was Rorik. He was alive, battered but conscious. And, to Talia's horror, he had others with him. More than just a few. An army. "Did you really think you could escape?" Rorik smirked. "The hunt never ends. And you, Corvin, will be its final prize." He gestured, and the hunters fanned out, surrounding them. It was a trap, carefully laid, and they had walked right into it. The gathering storm had broken. Chapter 18. Whispers of a Second Chance. The situation was dire. Surrounded by Rorik and his vastly superior force of hunters, Talia and Caspian were trapped, their backs literally against the wall, the pool of memories their only potential escape, and even that was an unknown. Despair threatened to engulf Talia, but she pushed it back, fueled by the rekindled flame of courage, by the memory of Caspian's kiss, by the weight of her newly recovered memories. "We knew this would be difficult," Caspian said, his voice low and steady, his hand gripping hers tightly, a silent reassurance, a tangible connection. "But we are not defeated." He drew his knife, the moonlight glinting off its polished blade. It was a futile gesture, a desperate act of defiance against overwhelming odds, but it was all they had. Rorik laughed, a cold, heartless sound that echoed through the cavern. "Foolish," he said. "You cannot win. The shadows are too strong. The curse is eternal." He gestured to his hunters, and they advanced, their weapons drawn, their eyes burning with a malevolent red light. They were a formidable force, trained killers, driven by a twisted loyalty to the shadows, to the power of the curse. Talia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart, trying to focus her mind. She remembered Lyra's curse, the power that flowed through her blood, the potential she held to break the cycle of violence, to end the hunt. She opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on Rorik, her voice clear and strong, echoing through the cavern. "The curse is not eternal," she said. "It can be broken. It will be broken." She raised her hands, her palms facing the pool of memories, channeling the power that flowed through her, the ancient magic of her ancestors. The air in the chamber crackled with energy, the water in the pool began to swirl, its surface shimmering with an intense, silver glow. The hunters hesitated, their advance faltering, their eyes widening in surprise and fear. They sensed the power that Talia wielded, the ancient magic that she was awakening. Rorik, however, remained unfazed. He sneered, his confidence unshaken.
"Tricks," he said.
"Illusions. They cannot save you." He lunged at Talia, his knife raised, his intention clear to silence her, to extinguish the power she held. But before he could reach her, Caspian intervened, intercepting his attack, his own knife flashing, deflecting Rorik's blow. They engaged in a fierce, desperate battle, their movements swift and brutal, the clash of steel echoing through the cavern. Talia, ignoring the battle raging beside her, focused her mind on the pool of memories, on the power that flowed through her, on the curse that she was determined to break. She spoke the words, the ancient words of her ancestors, the words that Lyra had used to unleash the curse, but this time, she spoke them with a different intention, with a different purpose. She spoke them to heal, to restore, to break the cycle of violence, to end the hunt. The water in the pool erupted in a blinding flash of silver light, a surge of power that filled the chamber, engulfing Talia, Caspian, Rorik, and the hunters. The air crackled with energy, the ground trembled, the walls of the cavern shook. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The light faded, the energy dissipated, the silence returned. Talia stood there, her body trembling, her mind reeling from the surge of power, from the force of the magic she had unleashed. She looked around, her eyes searching the chamber, trying to assess the aftermath of her actions. Caspian was standing beside her, his body unharmed, his golden eyes filled with awe and relief. He had dropped his knife, his gaze fixed on Talia, his expression a mixture of gratitude and love. Rorik and his hunters were gone, vanished, as if they had never been. The pool of memories was still, its surface calm and reflective, the ancient magic within it seemingly at peace. Talia had done it. She had broken the curse. She had ended the hunt. But at what cost? She looked at Caspian, her heart aching with a mixture of joy and sorrow. She knew that their journey was far from over, that the challenges they faced were not just external, but internal as well. We did it, Caspian said, his voice hoarse, his breath coming in ragged gasps. You broke the curse. Talia nodded, her own emotions overwhelming her. She had achieved her goal, fulfilled her destiny, but the victory felt bittersweet, tinged with the memory of Rorik's betrayal, with the knowledge of the sacrifices they had made, with the uncertainty of their future. Caspian reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. It was a gesture of comfort, of reassurance, of something more. What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Caspian smiled, a small, weary smile that reached his eyes, illuminating their golden depths, revealing a flicker of hope amidst the lingering shadows. "Now," he said, his voice soft, his gaze unwavering, "we have a second chance. A chance to live. A chance to love." His words echoed through the chamber, a whisper of hope, a promise of a future free from the curse, from the hunt, a future where they could finally embrace the forbidden desire that had blossomed between them, a future where they could, perhaps, find peace, together. Chapter 19. The Dance of Shadows and Light. Caspian's words hung in the air, a fragile promise of a future that seemed both impossibly distant and tantalizingly close. Talia looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The curse was broken, the hunt was over, but the scars of their past, the weight of their shared experiences, remained. They left the cavern, emerging from the hidden passage into the cool night air. The forest, once a place of fear and danger, now seemed peaceful, serene, the moonlight filtering through the leaves, creating an ethereal, almost magical atmosphere. They walked in silence for a while, their hands intertwined, their bodies close, their hearts beating in unison. They were both exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely exhilarated. They had faced death, they had overcome betrayal, and they had emerged victorious. Where do we go now? Talia asked, her voice soft, breaking the silence. Caspian stopped, turning to face her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite decipher: relief, gratitude, uncertainty, and something else. Something that looked like love. A love that had been tested, wounded, but not broken. A love that had blossomed in the darkness, a fragile flower reaching for the light. I don't know, he admitted, his voice honest, vulnerable. The world is different now. The hunt defined me. Defined us. He paused, his gaze shifting to the distant trees, his mind lost in thought. I need time, he said. To adjust. To figure out who I am without the hunt. Talia understood. She too needed time. Time to process the flood of memories, to reconcile her past with her present, to figure out who she was, without the constant threat of danger, without the burden of the curse. I understand, she said, her voice gentle, her touch reassuring. We both do. They continued walking, their pace slow and deliberate, their steps guided by the moonlight, by the stars, by the unspoken connection between them. They reached the small clearing where they had rested before, where the wild roses still bloomed, their petals a delicate shade of pink, their fragrance sweet and intoxicating. It was a place of beauty, of peace, of hope, a reminder of the love that had blossomed between them, a love that had survived the darkness, a love that deserved a chance to flourish. Caspian stopped beside the stream, his gaze fixed on the roses, his expression thoughtful. He reached out and gently touched one of the petals, his fingers tracing its delicate curve, his touch reverent, almost hesitant. They're beautiful, he said, his voice soft, his gaze shifting to Talia, his golden eyes filled with a warmth that melted the lingering chill of the night. They are, she agreed, her voice equally soft, her heart filled with a growing sense of peace, of contentment. They sat down beside the stream, close enough that their bodies touched, their shoulders brushing, their hands intertwined. They watched the moon, the stars, the silent dance of shadows and light in the forest. I never thought I'd see this, Caspian said, his voice low, his words heartfelt. A world without the hunt. A future without fear. He turned to Talia, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a vulnerability that touched her heart. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything. For believing in me. For loving me. Talia's heart overflowed with emotion. She leaned in and kissed him, softly at first, tentatively, then with a growing passion, a fierce tenderness. It was a kiss that spoke of gratitude, of hope, of a love that had been tested, wounded, but not broken. A love that had survived the darkness, a love that deserved a chance to shine. They broke apart, their gazes locked, their hearts pounding. They knew that the path ahead would not be easy, that they would face challenges, that they would have to navigate the complexities of their feelings, of their past, of their future. But they were ready. They were together. And they would face whatever came their way, hand in hand, their love a beacon of light in the darkness, a guiding star in the vast expanse of the unknown. The dance of shadows and light would continue, but now, they would dance it together, their steps guided by love, by hope, by a second chance at a future they had never dared to dream of. The unspoken question, however, remained. Now what? They had a second chance. But what did that mean? Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts. The night was drawing to a close, the first hints of dawn painting the eastern sky with hues of pink and gold. Talia and Caspian sat beside the stream, their bodies close, their hands intertwined, their hearts filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The curse was broken, the hunt was over, but their journey, their personal journeys, were far from complete. "We need to talk," Talia said, her voice soft but firm. She knew that they couldn't avoid the unspoken questions, the unresolved emotions that lingered between them. They had shared a kiss, a moment of passion, a promise of a future, but they needed to define that future, to confront their fears, to decide what they truly wanted. Caspian nodded, his golden eyes meeting hers, their depths filled with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. He, too, knew that this conversation was inevitable, necessary. They had been through so much together, faced so much danger, shared so much intimacy, but they had also held back, restrained by duty, by destiny, by the fear of the forbidden. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, his voice honest, vulnerable. Talia smiled, a small, reassuring smile that reached her eyes, illuminating their depths, revealing a flicker of hope amidst the lingering shadows. "Start with the truth," she said. "Start with how you feel." He took a deep breath, his chest expanding, his shoulders rising and falling. He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, their depths filled with a raw, unfiltered emotion that mirrored her own. I love you, Talia," he said, his voice low and husky, his words heartfelt, sincere. "I have for a long time, even before I knew who you were, even before the hunt." His confession, so long awaited, so deeply felt, sent a wave of warmth through Talia, melting the last vestiges of her fear, of her uncertainty. She had known, on some level, that he loved her, but to hear him say the words, to see the truth in his eyes, was a profound, transformative moment. "I love you too, Caspian," she said, her voice equally soft, equally sincere, her heart overflowing with emotion. "I have for a long time, even when I didn't remember, even when I thought it was impossible." They fell silent, their gazes locked, their hearts beating in unison. The words hung in the air between them, a testament to the love that had blossomed in the darkness, a love that had survived the curse, the hunt, the betrayal, a love that deserved a chance to flourish in the light. But there were still questions, still uncertainties. They had declared their love, but what did that mean for their future? How would they navigate the complexities of their past, of their different worlds, of their shared destiny? What happens now? Talia asked, her voice barely a whisper, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Caspian took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, his touch warm and reassuring. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a fierce determination, a unwavering resolve. We build a life," he said, "together. A life free from the shadows. A life filled with love." He paused, his gaze shifting to the rising sun, to the dawn of a new day, a new beginning. I don't know what that looks like," he admitted, his voice honest, vulnerable. "I've never known anything but the hunt. But I'm willing to learn, to adapt, to change." Talia smiled, her heart filled with a growing sense of peace, of contentment. She, too, was willing to learn, to adapt, to change. She had spent years running, hiding, living in fear, but now she was ready to embrace life, to embrace love, to embrace a future with Caspian. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. "Together, we'll build a life that honors our past, but is not defined by it." They stood up, their bodies close, their arms wrapping around each other, seeking comfort, seeking solace, seeking a connection that had been forged in the crucible of danger, a connection that had blossomed into a love that was both profound and enduring. They kissed, a long, passionate kiss that sealed their commitment, that promised a future filled with love, with hope, with a second chance at happiness. It was a kiss that banished the last vestiges of the shadows, that welcomed the dawn of a new day, a new beginning, a new life. The final confrontation of hearts had been won, not with weapons or magic, but with honesty, vulnerability, and a love that refused to be denied. They had faced their fears, they had embraced their destiny, and they had emerged victorious, their hearts intertwined, their futures intertwined, their love a beacon of light in a world that was finally, truly free. They walked toward the cottage, together, as the sun crested the horizon. Epilogue. The years that followed were not always easy. The world, even without the overt presence of the hunt, held its own challenges, its own complexities. Talia and Caspian faced them together, their love a constant source of strength, a beacon of hope in the inevitable storms of life. Caspian, freed from the burden of the hunt, slowly rediscovered himself. He learned to embrace the quiet moments, the simple pleasures of a life lived in peace. He found joy in gardening, in working with his hands, in building a home with Talia, their small cottage expanding over time, a testament to their growing love, their enduring commitment. Talia, her memories fully restored, embraced her heritage, her connection to the ancient magic of her ancestors. She became a healer, a wise woman, using her knowledge, her power, to help others, to guide those who sought her wisdom, her compassion. She never forgot the darkness she had faced, the sacrifices she had made, but she didn't let it define her. She chose to focus on the light, on the love, on the future. They often returned to the clearing where the wild roses bloomed, a place of remembrance, a place of peace, a place where their love had truly blossomed. They would sit beside the stream, their hands intertwined, their bodies close, their hearts filled with gratitude for the second chance they had been given, for the love that had saved them both. One evening, as the sun set, casting a golden glow on the forest, Talia and Caspian sat beside the stream, their shoulders touching, their hands clasped tightly. They were older now, their hair streaked with silver, their faces etched with the lines of time, but their love remained as strong, as vibrant, as passionate as it had been on that fateful night when the hunt had found Talia. "Do you ever miss it?" Talia asked, her voice soft, her gaze fixed on the wild roses, their petals a delicate shade of pink in the fading light. Caspian smiled, a small, knowing smile that reached his eyes, illuminating their golden depths. Sometimes, he admitted, his voice honest, his gaze shifting to Talia, his eyes filled with a love that had endured the test of time. "But I would never trade this. This life. This love." He leaned in and kissed her, softly at first, then with a lingering tenderness, a gentle passion that spoke of a love that had deepened, matured, grown stronger with each passing year. It was a kiss that sealed their bond, that reaffirmed their commitment, that celebrated a life lived fully, a love embraced completely. They broke apart, their gazes locked, their hearts filled with a profound sense of peace, of contentment. They had found their happily ever after, not in a fairy tale, but in the real world, in the quiet moments, in the shared laughter, in the enduring love that bound them together. The forest whispered around them, the wind rustling through the leaves, the stream murmuring its gentle song. The wild roses bloomed, their fragrance sweet and intoxicating, a reminder of the beauty, the resilience, the enduring power of love. And Talia and Caspian, hand in hand, heart to heart, sat in the twilight, their love a beacon of light, a testament to the enduring power of hope, a promise of a future that would always, always be theirs.